I call Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak on this Appropriation 2015-16 Estimates Bill and the second Imprest supply bill. This government has all been about forging a resilient and adaptive economy, and it's working extraordinarily well. So what we've seen over the last 4 years, for instance, Mr Speaker, is 194,000 further jobs created, 69,000 of those jobs in the last 12 months, and we've got a forecast of a further 128,000 jobs across the next 4 years. The outlook for growth is stable at a moderate level of between 2 and 2.5%, despite the softening conditions we've seen in commodity markets, particularly in dairy. Wage raises have been well ahead of inflation. The average wage grows about 3.6% in the last year. Inflation was a mere 0.3%, sir. Average wages have grown 15% over the last 5 years. The average wage has risen to $57,000, which is $10,000 a year more than when this government took office in 2008. Interest rates are low and will remain lower for longer. There is talk about potentially another cut in the not too distant future. But if we look at the record of the previous government there, Mr Speaker, when Labor exited, they had interest rates running hard, trying to reach 11% and actually winning the race. Under this government, they are low and they will remain lower for longer. Under this government, we have also seen now 5 years of positive household savings. And that's the first time the country's seen that, sir, in 20 years. Now, that is all a good news story. It's good news for the past few years, and it's still a good news story looking forward. We have developed a resilient and adaptive economy. But if we listen to the opposition, sir, all they want to do is talk down New Zealand and its prospects. And one only has to look across to the opposition leadership seats to see doom and gloom. In fact, the only person smiling on the Labor benches is Grant Robertson, because he sees his leadership hopes rekindled with every day and every speech that Andrew Little makes. And I think Gene Simmons probably agrees with him. Sir, this budget this government has delivered and has pledged for New Zealand for the next years and years to come includes a $790 million package to help reduce hardship, the children, their families in greatest need. It includes a $25 a week increase to benefits for families with children. $25 a week increase. That is the first increase to real benefits in 43 years. 43 years. And in 43 years, there have been 2 Labor administrations. Neither of those did that. Neither of them. But we had long years, some might say insufferable years under those 2 Labor administrations, and neither of them were raising real benefits, as this government has done. But we recognise that the way out of our hardship is through work. And we do recognise that low-income families still find times tough, can find times tough. So we've included in the budget assistance for them too. $12.50 a week for low-income families who are receiving working for family subsidies but not benefits. We've also increased childcare support allowances for low-income families. These initiatives are targeted around 160,000 families, covering approximately 300,000 children. This is from a government, sir, that cares, a government that is prepared to tackle real, often things that are seen as often intractable problems, and to take real measures to help those in need. Along with that, we recognise that New Zealanders are living longer, and we want them to live healthier lives as well as longer lives. So we've increased health spending by $1.7 billion. The annual spend in health is just a shade under $16 billion. In education, a further $680 million, because we understand and appreciate that if we want a better life for our children in the future, if it starts at home with the way they're raised at a young age, it's continued, strengthened and really reinforced through good education. So another $680 million in the compulsory education sector, and that brings that spend to over $10 billion, in fact almost $11 billion a year. Significant reductions in ACC levies. helping to reduce costs for businesses, helping to reduce costs for people, and believe me, a lot of New Zealanders have experienced and are still looking forward to the reduction in the ACC levels on their next motor vehicle registration. As well as that, we're having heard lots of noise from the other side about property speculation, we took steps to strengthen the tax rules on property investment. Tax rules that have existed in this country for decades. We've applied a bright line test to make sure that the courts and the Inland Revenue Department can more readily address those people that are speculating with investment properties. But what we did was strengthen what was already there. Now, sir, there could be a number of reasons why people might say to themselves that the opposition are not fit to govern. Formulating public policy on the basis of what someone's surname sounds like is reason enough alone for them to remain on the opposition benches for decades to come.
It's Bayesian analysis.
But beyond that, it might be Bayesian analysis, but it was poorly directed policy, I can tell you that. So if that isn't reason enough on its own that they should stay there for decades to come, they don't even understand the existing tax provisions in New Zealand.
That's right.
There is already a capital gains tax in New Zealand for people that speculate on property. And what this government has done is strengthened the measures to make sure that it can be applied more readily in court and Inland Revenue. And they oppose it. They scream black and blue about property speculation and then oppose measures to do something about it. Well, that's just simply a party that is not fit to govern at all. Now, along with this, sir, we've been doing a lot around building this resilient and adaptive economy to make sure that it's diversified. And we've seen the results in that. So over the past year, the ICT sector now comprises about 1.7% of GDP. On its own, ICT is 1/3 of dairy. And we appreciate that dairy is going through a tough time. ICT has grown 9% per year since 2008. It's now 1/3 of dairy, at 1.7% of GDP. International education, $2.85 billion a year, 1.33% of GDP. The wine industry, wine exports, $1.4 billion, so that's up 8% over the last year. It's about 0.7% of GDP and growing. High-tech manufacturing from $139 million in 1991 to $1.4 billion in 2012. Tourism, now 7% of GDP, it's larger than dairy. And beef exports, we've heard a lot of people talk about how while dairy is down, beef is up $3.1 billion. It's been up 34% over the last year alone. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes, sir, just within this diversified economy talking about ICT. We've invested or announced in the budget an additional $360 million around UFB and RBI broadband infrastructure, $100 million in a contestable fund to expand rural broadband coverage across the country, $50 million to address some mobile black spots, thank you Mr Speaker, and $210 million additional to expand the coverage of the ultra-fast broadband program to 80% of the population. Together, when they're complete, we'll be covering almost 100% of the population, but probably about 49% of the geography, which is why we've announced that $50 million to deal with some black spots. It's a real issue given the geography of New Zealand. But what we are doing, and that will bring our investment to broadband infrastructure in New Zealand to around $2 billion. What we're doing is investing in capability for New Zealand businesses to grow, to employ more people, to take their goods and services to markets across the country and around the world. And what we've seen there, sir, if I look at what UFB's already achieved, look at Timaru. It's a company in Timaru, software development company. Before UFB employed 1 person. Now they employ 12. They're able to deliver their services not only to customers across New Zealand, but outside of New Zealand. And now ICT is the 3rd largest sector in Timaru. That's a fantastic result. Or in Whangarei, sir, where a doctor used to have to book clients into the local hospital for retina scans, does them in his practice, sends them over the internet to the hospital. Much easier and quick for him, better for the patients, far better health service. Or the panel beater, sir, the panel beater in the North Shore, who has got a 15% productivity improvement by taking photos and videos of the damage, sending them through to the assessor, getting the job done and approved much quicker and getting the customer out the door. Sir, this is a good budget for New Zealand. It's a great economy we've developed for New Zealand. It's one we intend to continue. I commend the bill to the House.
Members, this debate is concluded. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Party vote's been called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 opposed.
New Zealand First.
12 votes opposed.
Maori Party.
2 votes in favour.
AG New Zealand.
1 vote in favour.
United Future.
1 vote in favour.
Members, the ayes are 63, the noes are 58. The motion is agreed to.
Appropriation 2015-16 Estimates Bill, third reading. Imprest Supply, second for 2015-16 Bill, second reading.
The Imprest Supply, second for 2015-16 Bill, was set down for third reading forthwith. Go for the call. The Honourable Nikki Kay.
I move that the Imprest Supply, second for 2015-16 Bill, be now read a third time.